And we also got our final numbers. I'm pulling up my magic marker here. We also got our final numbers on GDP for quarter two, and they actually surprisingly popped up a hot amount. So let's take a look at that first. So GDP popped up to 3.8%. Prior, which was the advanced numbers, there's I'm sorry, not the advanced numbers, this is the preliminary. First, they give you the advanced numbers, then they get some more datas and they revise that number and give you the preliminary number. And then in the final month, they get everything they've got and they put it together and they give you the final number. The final number is 3.8% versus 3.3%. That's a half a percent higher. And so as soon as that was released, a whole bunch of folks, who otherwise were turned off by US bonds were like, "Hey, the US isn't doing so bad." So they took money out of equities, put them into, secure bonds, especially if the US isn't doing so bad. So that was you know, some good information regarding the US economy. Then, of course, we get our weekly report on jobless claims, and our jobless claims this go around were not as bad as they have been. And so, again, that's good news. It means that the labor market might not be as weak as some people thought about. Remember the Fed last week dropped interest rates by a quarter point, and the reasoning is that they're focusing on making sure to shore up the labor market. Well, this week's unemployment report, which is probably one of the more accurate reports. I mean, we've made it here in the US um, so process oriented in order to collect an unemployment check that there's a lot of good data that is gathered versus, for instance, some of our employment numbers that come once a month. Those are coming from surveys. Who knows if the individuals or the corporations return their surveys on time? We don't know if we have, the statisticians, especially with budget cuts in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in order to cull that data. Whereas, the unemployment, there's a system, there's a computer in place, and there's literal reports and analytics that you can pull. It's not just, surveys and statistics. So that number showed that this week unemployment seems to have kind of uh, shored up a little bit. And then today, personal income and outlays, which is, what Greenspan and others really like to use for inflation uh numbers. Well, I'll just show you. uh First of all, on the raw numbers, the personal income and the personal consumption, it looks like it kind of ticked up, right? That it's getting a little bit out of control. Then you take a look at the PCE price index. That's where, out of the raw numbers, they focus on kind of those. They apply some correction factors, and uh, it shows that it ticked up a little bit, and that was expected, right? They expected it to tick up a little bit, and it did by the amount that they expected. And remember, when you're looking at this monthly number versus this annual number, this is kind of, in my way of, like, the monthly number is almost looking through the windshield of the car, and the annual number is looking through the rear view mirror, right? So this zero point 0.3 that we have, if you kind of extrapolate it and say, okay, what if we hold at zero point 0.3 for the next 12 months? It comes out to 3.6, right? And remember, the Fed's target that they're always talking about is 2. So you'd rather it be zero point 0.2 every month than zero point 0.3, right? Zero point 0.2 would extrapolate out to 2.4. So, this is maybe not the best news for inflation. When you come down here to the core numbers, Well, the core numbers, that's where we factor out things that are very volatile, like the price of gas, the price of milk, the price of eggs, things that go up and down in price depending on, did the birds get sick this week? Did we have, something going on in the Middle East that caused the price of oil to pump? Did we have a storm that caused? So they take out all those volatile components so that we get an idea of just the solid, more stable measurements, and that's doing pretty good. So, what does this, as summary, say? It says maybe that things are a little bit hotter in inflation, but just a tiny bit more. And so when you combine that where you've got good GDP, at least for quarter two, we're already at the end of quarter three, but good GDP in quarter two, you got um, better employment than you thought, and maybe inflation is starting to heat up again. What that comes down to is the idea that the Fed may not drop interest rates like we thought in both October and December, which I'm sure in the next we're going to hear from the president who wants, the Fed to juice the economy to drop interest rates. We're going to probably start seeing the rhetoric ramp up again about how the Fed is untrustworthy and so on and so forth because if you take a look at the expectations, this is for this upcoming October, end of October. This number has dropped. If we take a look at what it was when we met last week, 1 week ago, this number was at 92%, and it's down at 87%. Still, everybody believes the Fed's going to drop rates next week or in October, end of October. But that number is coming down because things are strong. Employment's not so bad. And if inflation is starting to heat up, the Fed will not want to drop rates. In fact, they'll want to raise rates. So, yeah, I see this number going down. And then the December number really dropped. This number was up at 80%, and now it's down at 65%.